Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom, I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate in the office of the Prime Minister this Thursday, the 12th of December, day 433 of the October 7th War, the Simchat Torah War. Just a couple of points from me and then we'll get straight to your questions. My friends, as usual, please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to each one of them together with your news outlet. First, on last night's terror attack on a bus not far from Bethlehem on its way to Jerusalem. It was a passenger bus with families on board. The Palestinian terrorist opened fire at the bus. The murderer shot to kill, and he did. A 12-year-old boy was killed. His name was Yeshua Aaron Tuvia Simcha. He lived in Beitar Illit. Other passengers were also injured. The Prime Minister spoke for the nation, sending sincere and deep condolences to the family. The Prime Minister said that the pure soul of a child was brutally taken from us. Our hearts ache with his family. Yeshua is the 17th child murdered by terrorists in Israel in 2024 alone. The terrorist was apprehended. Let me make clear, there will be no safe haven for terrorists in Judea and Samaria. Our security forces will thwart the plans of terrorists throughout our region. Hamas and Iran incite terror against our people, and our children are murdered as a result. We will fight to eliminate terror from wherever it emerges. Next on Syria, let me share with you a readout from this morning's Jerusalem meeting between the Prime Minister and US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan together with his team. Regional developments in Syria were obviously discussed, and Israel will do whatever is necessary to protect our security from any threat. That was the reason the government mandated our security forces to temporarily take control of the buffer zone between Israel and Syria until an effective force is established to enforce the 1974 Separation of Forces Agreement. The Prime Minister raised the vital need to assist minorities in Syria, and prevent terrorist activity from Syrian territory against Israel. Separate from that meeting, Israel has also clarified that in the light of violations of the disengagement agreement between Israel and Syria from May 1974, and with the entry of armed militants into the buffer zone in breach of the agreement, and attacks on UNDOF, the UN force of UNDOF positions in the area, Israeli action was required. So for defensive reasons, due to the imminent threat by these jihadist groups operating near the border, and in order to prevent a scenario similar to October the 7th in this area, Israel entered the buffer zone. As we have said before, we reiterate, this is a limited and a temporary operation. Next, let me share with you that an interceptor was fired towards a UAV in the area of Eilat. The UAV was likely launched from Yemen and approached Israeli territory. The UAV did not actually cross into Israel and no injuries were reported. But the Houthis will find out, as Hezbollah did in Lebanon, that Israel's patience is not inexhaustible. Lastly, this morning, international media reported attacks on aid workers in Gaza. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. Let me share with you the facts. As we say here in the Prime Minister's office, the facts don't lie. Overnight, Israel received intelligence of Hamas terrorists wanting to hijack aid. The IDF conducted precise strikes on armed terrorists, Hamas terrorists, gathered at two different points inside southern Gaza. These were terrorists operating in the humanitarian corridor. Now, our strike ensured the safe delivery of this aid to Gazans. All the terrorists were eliminated, and they were all Hamas. Our intelligence has showed that they plan to violently hijack the aid trucks and transfer them to Hamas. Why? To support their terror and cause hardship to Gazans. Where there is hunger, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas, because of Hamas hijacking aid. Now, Israel prevented that, and it goes without saying that Israel, of course, does not strike humanitarian aid trucks, and the now humanitarian corridor remains open and active because of this Israeli action. Yes, Israel precisely operates against Hamas, and yes, we take every measure to mitigate harm to uninvolved Gazans. Let me share with you our latest figures of aid which has gone into Gaza in the last 24 hours alone. 251 aid trucks went into Gaza yesterday. Food, medical goods, shelter, sanitation supplies. 122 trucks were collected from the Gazan side of Kerem Shalom by international organizations, but still 550 trucks worth of aid are still awaiting collection. And a convoy of 34 trucks entered Gaza directly through Gate 96, as did 6 tankers of cooking gas for essential infrastructure and 1 tanker of fuel which went into northern Gaza for refueling their essential infrastructure. The IDF and Kogat acts in accordance with international law. Hamas are attempting to starve their own people, but Israel gets the food in. So that's the end of our briefing here today. I'll now take your questions. Please put them in the chat together with your news outlet, and we will take them. First question I can see here is from David Clement at the News Forum. The Prime Minister said that troops will stay in the Syrian buffer zone until there are security guarantees. Has the government reached out and attempted to establish relations with the new government in Syria? Thank you for that question, David. We've made clear in this briefing that our presence in that buffer zone is temporary until alternative arrangements are made to return to the separation agreement from 1974. As you know, the Syrian armed forces abandoned their posts. Jihadis were approaching our border. There was a real risk not only to the Undor force, which Israel repelled, but also of jihadis with an appetite for massacres approaching our border. We will not let that happen. And in terms of the rest of your question, I haven't got anything more to add with you on that. As soon as we have any further information, we will share that with you. Needless to say, Israel is most definitely wants to have good relations with all of our neighbors in this region. If there is a new beginning, then we would certainly welcome that for the benefit of all the people in our region. Next question here is from Fred Ager. Syrian rebel leader Abu Muhammad al-Jolani's group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, plans to collaborate with international organizations to secure chemical weapons sites. Al-Jolani declares he plans to form a transitional technocratic government to rule until March 2025. The Pentagon welcomed al-Jolani's comments, but warns action must align with words. To which extent is Israel's government concerned about HTS controlling the chemical weapons sites, and does it trust al-Jolani with respect to the rule of law? Thank you for that question, Fred. Look, this is not a matter of trust. It isn't important what people say, it is important what people do. As you know, over the last few days, the IDF has struck most of the strategic weapon stockpiles in Syria. The reason we did this, the reason Israel did this, was to prevent them from falling into the hands of terrorist elements, and our Monday night action in particular will have taken out lots of the threat of these weapons, including chemical weapons. As I've made clear in this briefing, Fred, Israel is very much interested and hopes for peaceful and neighbourly relations. The Prime Minister's made this clear between our two countries. Yes, of course, but none of us here are under any illusions about the forces which have won control of Syria. We know their providence. We know the things which they stand for. And we know precisely how to defend ourselves. Okay, next question here is from Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press. Does Israel plan to continue to strike Hamas terrorists who attempt to hijack aid in Gaza? Is this a new policy? Thank you for that question, Hannah. Look, let me answer that question this way. Our war aims have been clear since the beginning here. Excuse me for repeating them again. We say very clearly that the war will continue until all of our war aims are met. The return of our hostages, 100 of them, dismantling of Hamas's governmental and military capabilities, the removing of the terrorist threat to Israel, and the return of all of our residents to the north safely to their homes. As you know, our fighters, the defenders of Israel, our armed forces, they are operating boldly and bravely to bring back our hostages and eliminate the terrorist threat to our citizens. So, is this a new policy? No, I do not believe it is. Within those war aims, it clearly says that Hamas will no longer be in charge. There is no scenario where Hamas remain in charge in Gaza. No scenario whatsoever. Hamas are trying to provoke a famine. They are trying to provoke hunger. Where there is hunger in Gaza, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas. Where we have intelligence of Hamas stealing aid and their plans to steal aid, Israel will act. From the very beginning of this conflict, President Biden said that the aid would stop if Hamas hijack the aid. Where there is intelligence of Hamas's intent to steal the aid, Israel will act. Next question. Okay. Can you just scroll up? Are there any more questions? Oh. Okay. Fine. That seems to be the last question for today. So thank you for joining us. In the meantime, you can get in touch in the usual way, but please do stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.